Welcome once again to another edition of the Old School Shooters podcast on the Hannibal TV platforms. I'm Jack Kilby, and I'm joined as per usual by the King of Connecticut. And tonight we have a very special guest, former Cosa Nostra member and acclaimed author, Larry Mazza. Larry, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm great, and I appreciate you guys inviting me on. Thank you.
Thank you, King. I as per the custom, I'm looking at your absolutely breathtaking jacket, very Sinatra-esque, and I see you've got the gold. What beverage are we working on tonight?
I'm drinking a green tea martini. Really nice, simple drink. I put ice in my mixer here with some green tea and vodka. Just shake it up. Just keep it simple. Very, very refreshing beverage.
Nice.
Well, that is certainly important. Nice. You always have an appropriate beverage for the occasion and the guest. Did you want to? What do you have there, Larry?
I just poured myself because I had a little bit of a stressful day, and I wasn't supposed to be drinking for the next 3 days, but I'm cheating, and because I do that, I'll make sure I go 3-4 days without drinking so your body can recover, your kidneys, your liver. I go through it all. So, but tonight I needed it, so I poured myself with a big cube, a nice Glenlivet 18. So it goes down smooth. Just one. By the time we get through the show and stuff, I'll be nice and settled, calm, but I needed it today. Every once in a while, you need it. So
very nice. My Celtic ancestors would approve.
Yes.
King, did you want to start off by discussing your long-term friendship with Larry?
Well, I want to say that when it comes to fine beverages, I've had the distinct pleasure of staying at Larry's house on quite a few occasions, and he's got some beautiful bars. He's got a beautiful pool bar, as well as a nice bar in the house. And Larry and I have been guests together on a few shows. MMA Power Hour that airs here on Hannibal TV. A young man out of New York, Serious and Silliness podcast, and I believe Adrian Martinez's podcast too, right? Yeah. And how many? I've interviewed Larry quite a few. It's more of conversations with Larry. He brought Larry down to my law firm, to Berman Law Group Studios, with my co-host Brittany. I sent you that interview, Jack, and interviewed Hannibal the first time. Larry, rather, for Hannibal TV the first time at his house. So we've had a number of interviews.
Oh, the gym.
And the gym with Bob Carson, Bullet Bobby C, who's a guy whose life was really touched by the mob as well. His father was involved in the unions and a corrupt guy. His dad was a degenerate gambler and was actually kidnapped by one of the families. He's got a crazy story, and he's a good fighter, good young man. And he came in and interviewed Larry with me as well after a great event that we had in Melbourne at a nice pizza place, an Italian restaurant, for Larry's book. And I really recommend everybody buy Larry's book, The Life. It's old school as it gets, being old school shooters. And I want to thank Larry because back in the spring, I was down in our firm in Boca Raton with Dan the Beast Severn, UFC Hall of Famer. And Dan and I were looking to do some coaching clinics together. And Larry is very involved, lifelong martial artist. He has a great gym, great dojo as well in the Cocoa Beach area. Larry does. And he set up a seminar with Dave DeKilo at Unlimited Kickboxing for and it really was it was a perfect fit because with Dan Severn and I, with our wrestling and grappling background, and submission wrestling background, and them with their kickboxing background, we were really able to help their guys that do the mixed martial arts in their grappling. And that's what I mean, God, talk about old school. To me, old school is giving back, giving back to the youth. And I've been coaching wrestling since 1990. I started originally coaching youth wrestling, and so it's been 32 years. And I love it. I love coaching, and I want to thank Larry because Larry has a great friend named Phil Collins, not the rocker, Phil Collins, or the pop artist Phil Collins, but a great kickboxer who came up the ranks with Donnie Hare and Don the Dragon Wilson and Larry, and he was a coach at a couple of Larry's gyms over the years, because Larry's owned a number of dojos over the years. And I now have the privilege of coaching at his school. He loves me to come in and coach. I'm coming back there tomorrow night. And it's also helped me to provide content for the Hannibal TV with the techniques there in the ring, and doing an ad for a gorgeous lawyer, Erica Garnes. We're going to make her the champion of the injured people of Florida, and I'm going to film that over there in his ring. And she's just you talk about bazooms, just a beautiful Latin woman. She's got it going on in all the right places. Gorgeous face, just oh my! I just get myself a little excited. She's an old school woman as well. My own Venezuelan glory. I love the South American women. I love the old school women, and she's quite a tomato. She's quite a fine woman, and she's going to be starring in this ad that we're going to shoot there as well at Phil's Collins gym. So I want to thank Larry for that, and
you're both good guys, so it's good you're together. Phil's very much, what's the word? Committed to teaching, and he's been doing it for a long time now. And he's learned a lot more about the MMA stuff. He started out as an American kickboxer, but he's learned a lot over the years about the MMA. So yeah, it's good. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah, it's funny. I did a technique for quite a number of techniques for the Hannibal for this channel, because they're actually, should let Larry know, this is Canada's top combat sports channel. They have over 340,000 YouTube subscribers. They have a massive Facebook page. And Larry, this is the channel that I originally interviewed you for. Okay. Great channel. Right. And I did a technique on Phil, and I told a story from way back in the day in my younger bouncer days. And actually, this goes way back to like my early 20s. And it was a club that was kind of notorious at being a mobbed up club, as many were on the Long Island Sound in that day. And I told a story I showed the technique with that front face lock, how I removed a guy and found out that he was the wrong guy to remove, because he was.
I saw that clip. I saw the
Yeah. So certainly kind of crosses stories and genres. And that's what Jack and I like to do on the show, is just talk about what it means to be old school, Larry. And you're so old school, and you sing Tom Jones. You got a great voice. Carlos Carr, of course, did that tribute to your book.
Great song.
So, yeah. So, Larry, talk about that. A lot of people don't know that you're a crooner. You're a fantastic crooner.
Well, I think you're being a little too kind. I could probably hold a note. I could probably hold my own, but I'm not in the league like a Carlos. Like, you just, put me in the same boat as him. It's not fair, because he's an incredible professional. But I enjoy it. I have my fun. I've been on stage. I've been in shows now. I've been in a movie. I have my own talk show for Mob TV. So I'm okay in front of a camera, in front of people. And I'm enjoying it. I'm actually enjoying it. So, yeah. So I'll do a few. You saw me do Tom Jones.
Of course. Yeah, I saw you do Tom Jones. And, when we were at Carlos's house, and we were all singing together. You sang a
Yeah,
little Tom Jones, and
yeah,
of
right,
course,
right.
I love to serenade the ladies with some Sinatra and Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
And
I saw you
talk
singing,
about
girl.
yeah. So I think it's a
Yeah.
great story because it's such an old school story of how you met Carlos Carr and how he wrote the song about your book.
Well, here's what happened. I have my gym, and my wife was retiring, so she opened up a florist shop because she wanted to get into doing weddings and things like that. And the florist shop would be a segue, people coming for the flowers and stuff. So when we opened, we added a wine bar, okay, because the front of the store is just wasted space. If you think about it, people come in, they order and they leave, or they order online, they walk in and they leave. So the whole front, we said, let's do something. We added a wine bar, and I'm going to go fast through this plot to get to the question. So once we did that, it brought in more people. One night we brought in a piano player. It brought in more people. Then we started adding a little bit of food. Next thing you know, we opened up. We needed a bigger place, which we got. It was called Stems with a Z. The logo was a wine glass that turns into a rose, or the other way around. And now we had entertainment every single night. We had a jazz night, we had a rock and roll night, we had a dance night with disco-ish, that type of from the old days, the old '70s music, and we had Frank Sinatra night, which was Carlos. But the funny thing is, he walked in one day and he handed me a little CD of his music. And I feel bad saying this, I didn't get around to listening. Okay. And about a week or two went by and he came back in. And I told him, oh, I did listen to it. I think you're great. And I didn't. Okay. But what happened was, and it shows you how things happen for a reason. My wife, Kelly, was on the phone arguing with our entertainer who was drunk from an afternoon gig. He did play it in the afternoon. He drank too many beers, whatever he had, and he couldn't make it to our show. So we had nobody. Carlos is standing there. I said, would you like to play tonight? Now, I never heard him. I just saw he was a nice man, very well spoken, personable. He came that night. I was so impressed. He comes in a tuxedo, sets up his music, and how he intermingled with the crowd and everything. And he sounds just like Sinatra. Okay, so we changed every night was Friday with Sinatra, and we had a dinner and a show, and he was there with me for a couple of years. Eventually, we sold the restaurant because it was taking me away from the gym. It was just consuming our lives now. So anyway, but that's how I met Carlos. And in the time he was there, I got close with him and I told him a little bit about my life, a little bit more about it, a little bit more. Then he started watching stuff on TV, reading up on it, and he got to understand my life. And he wrote a song that captures it pretty well in a little 3-4 minute song. He really captures the important parts, and he's written so many other things. But I tell you what, that's at the top of the list for him. That is one of the best songs and again, I've seen a few of his originals or heard a few of them. This one is phenomenal. It's called The Life. It's called The Life.
Oh
And
yeah,
if somebody wants to
yeah.
check it out if they like Sinatra. Sinatra would have loved to do this song. All you have to do is go on YouTube or Google me, and you'll see Larry Mazza Life come up, and you'll be able to find the song, whether on YouTube or on my website for the book. So yeah, but he's a great
That
guy.
was beautiful, beautiful
Yeah.
song. And, he performed that song when we were at his
Mhm.
house. You and
Yeah.
I and your beautiful wife Kelly were at his house, and
Mhm.
he had a studio in his home, and it was awesome. And talk about old school. I mean, Carlos Carr
Mhm.
is so old school. From Chile, he and his brother were mega superstars
Right. Our
in
twin.
uh, in Chile. Yeah, great crooner,
Mhm.
and went out to Vegas
Yep.
and performed in Vegas. I have a friend who's so old school. I want to get him on the show,
Yeah.
Larry, and I'd love for you to meet him.
I love it.
Speaking of Sinatra, my buddy Brian, Brian Dupree, I want to give him kind of a shout out, and his gorgeous wife Jamie. She's the Marilyn Monroe, and he's the Frank Sinatra. And Brian has been performing the Sinatra cover act since the late 80s, early 90s.
Mhm.
And we went to college together. And he's out in Vegas. He's on all the billboards. Brian Dupree, he travels the
Yeah.
world. His main thing is Vegas. He's got a really nice home out there. And
I definitely like to meet him. And you got to realize,
yeah,
Vegas, no, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
yeah.
talking old school, I just wanted to throw this in there. He was playing in the lounges and in the hotel lounges, and he was so good that a lot of times he would have the 12. They shifted, but if he was doing the 12 o'clock midnight till say 2 or 3 in the morning, he said when shows ended, like Tom Jones, Paul Anka, Wayne Newton, these guys would come and sit in the audience at the lounge and watch him. How old school?
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's so cool.
These are names that are legendary. They would come and sit with him, and I could picture it, through the older days, the 70s, 80s, or.
Oh, yeah.
He did some Atlantic City time too. He did some in New York. Made the rounds. He made it, but he did 30 years in Vegas. So, but again, top notch, and yeah, it brings you back to those old days, which is nice. It's a lost art to actually write.
Definitely. And speaking of old school and speaking of Vegas, I before there was this whole like mob genre of interviews that kind of started a few years ago. I had a show with a guy out of Chicago, big Brian Snow, basketball player, called the Cubs games. It was called Arena Sport on the Arena Sports, and it was called King's Court. And nobody was doing these mob interviews back then. And this was my old podcast. And I knew some guys, and someone that I knew that was close to a relative of mine was Tony Napoli. And I had him on my show and did his last interview before he passed away. And I actually found that and re-uploaded it. And he was a guy, his father was a Genovese family boss. And and Tony was a guy who was a boxer. Tony was a pro boxer when he was younger, under the name Tony Rio. His dad didn't want him to fight. And then his dad sent him out to Vegas to run the casinos back in those days. And man, Tony had a great Sinatra story. It was a funny Sinatra story. Sinatra had such toughness, such machismo already, because he thought he was so connected. And the way Tony tells his story, Tony's dead now, but this story was hilarious. We all love Sinatra, but he has a story where it was a Jewish gangster that was running that particular casino, and they couldn't help Sinatra. Sinatra was disrespecting a lot of guys and ended up taking a beating. And Tony Knapp had to take Sinatra to the dentist to get his teeth fixed. Wow. It's a funny story, than the way he tells it. And I uploaded that, and I'll send that to you, Jack. Yeah. It's one that I'm sure Hannibal. God, Tony Knapp was like in his 90s when I interviewed him, and that was years ago.
You remember the story about Sinatra when Don Rickles was in the restaurant with his latest new girlfriend? You know that one?
Yeah, tell that story.
I'm going to go through it for people that don't know it. So Don Rickles has his beautiful new girlfriend, and he tells Frank Sinatra, he asks Frank, I want to impress this girl. Would you mind coming over and saying hello to us? So Frank says, fine, I'll do that. So he's sitting there at the table having dinner with this girl. Frank comes over and says, hey, Don, how you doing? Don Rickles looks up at him and says, not now, Frank, I'm busy. So imagine doing that to Frank Sinatra. He was too busy for him. So I thought that was a good story. There's another nasty old story, but it's pretty much true based on who told it to me, that Sam Giancana wanted Sammy Davis Jr. to play for his daughter's something. whether it was Sweet 16 or wedding, whatever it was, I don't remember. So Sammy had a previous engagement, and he said he couldn't do it. So Sam told Frank, "You tell him if he doesn't do the show for us, we'll take out his other eye." Needless to say, Sammy came and did the show. So
Nice.
there's a lot of stories about Hollywood and the mob, and again, old school, old times when you could probably get away with that stuff. Now you can't. And the last little story I remember, it was funny, was, and it was Jerry Vale was singing, and I was there. I was watching him sing. And he says he was singing at this place in New York a few years back. And there was this unruly guy. And it was Jilly Rizzo's place, who was Frank Sinatra's right-hand man. So they dragged this guy out, and they give him a beating in the back, the back door. So while they're beating him up, Jerry Vale's watching this, and he says, Frank Sinatra comes walking out. And he starts begging Frank, "Help me, help me." All Frank had to do was say, "All right, enough, fellas." It's, in other words, like he almost ordered it. So he had a little, way about him that the chairman of the board, the little,
Oh, yeah.
But he played it up too. He played it up. He was what he was. He was an entertainer. But
That's why that story that Tony Knapp told was so interesting, because like the way he was saying it, and I'll get you guys that show to watch. He was talking about the bravado that Sinatra had, but he just was in the wrong place. It was a Jewish owned casino, and he had to take a beating. Yeah, even Frank. Yeah. Speaking of Jillies, and this is interesting, and Jack will really appreciate this. I had Larry Zabisco on my old podcast. Larry lives here in Florida. He's not that far away. And Larry, of course, came into the pro wrestling world with Bruno Sammartino was his mentor. And Larry Zabisco has a hilarious story about Jillies that involves Bruno Sammartino and Carlo Gambino. It's a really funny story. So that's on my old show. Jack, speaking of that, there's so much great content from my old show. I think I should probably give some of that to you and the Hannibal if you guys want to post it.
yeah,
Absolutely. If I could just take a second, Larry, and move to the philosophical. One of the questions that we like to ask the guests on the Old School Shooters podcast is, what does it mean conceptually to be old school to you on a basic philosophical level?
Well, it starts with, as simple as this sounds, parenting. You're brought up by your parents, and you have you're brought up a certain way, rules of life, so to speak. Then some of us go in directions where it gets further implanted in us, and it could be anywhere. It could be a job, it could be the church, it could be your college. For me, it was the mob guys. As I got around serious old school mob guys that were traditionalists, the way you dressed, the way you spoke, the way you conducted yourself around women and elders. And that's why a lot of good kids got sucked up into life, because they had the traits that they were looking for. Okay. Now you'll see this new breed of gangster with an A or an ER or whatever. It doesn't even matter. They'll be seen going to meetings or sit downs, not dressed like businessmen or people of stature, but dressed with hoodies and all this extra fake gold on and stuff like that. So that's not old school, and without getting political, things that are happening to our world and our country now are not old school, So the young kids are being taught different things in school. They're being taught that, I'll just say the one thing that it burns me up. Christopher Columbus was a horrible human being. I'm not buying it. Okay. He might not have been a model citizen. He might have been involved in some things that aren't nice today, but he didn't start it. He didn't start those things, slavery and things like that. He didn't start it. It was there, and I don't know, really the details, but all of a sudden he was a horrible man. But meanwhile,
Well, Larry, Larry, let me interject on that, because it's important. This is important historically for people to understand. For me, as a Sicilian American, the reason why Christopher Columbus is such a symbol in America goes back, Larry, to when our ancestors first came here in the late 1800s. We were the victims of the largest lynching in the history of the South.
Yeah.
In New Orleans,
Yeah.
Louisiana.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why Columbus was presented as a figure originally in America was because, and it wasn't just one lynching, it was one that was a single largest, but it was because of these egregious acts. And the Columbus statues throughout cities in America are a symbol of pride for Italian Americans, and because the Italian government actually got involved, in that. Now, Columbus, one could argue, he's from up in Genoa. He sailed for the Queen of Spain. He's not from the part of Italy that was even part of the same country when our ancestors came here. But that doesn't matter, because Columbus was a symbol for so many generations.
And he was a good explorer. I mean, they thought the world was flat until he came along, if you remember that, okay? He still found and mapped out routes throughout the world. So he did a lot of good things, and just to slander him. But going back to, again, the old school thing, I'm not going to change that. Nobody's going to change my opinion of him or others, and there's certain things I hold a certain way because of my upbringing and the traditionalists. So to me, it starts there. It's what you learn, what you believe in, and you don't get swayed by some lunatic that thinks everything else is right and you're wrong. So to me, that's old school. I still like old school music. And again, this isn't to slander anybody. I'm not a rap guy. How are you going to turn me into a rap guy? And from being in prisons, that was a big problem. You put me in a cell with a young 18-year-old rap kid, we're going to have a beef. You're not blasting that in my cell all night. It's not racist. It's just, now if you want to play Frank Sinatra while I'm trying to go to sleep, we're good with that, or a little nice soft jazz or whatever. But so there's culture clashes, and there's clashes like that now, and no more prevalent than in prison. That's the worst of the culture clashes. And that's why in my book, there was a little section of where some people said I did a little bit of racist stuff, but I had to tell it like it was. Okay? It is racist in prison. You got gangs, you got black, you got white, and it's going to be that way. And for me to present it any other way would have been false. So,
sure. Let me tell a story that relates to that, Larry and Jack. And Jack, I told this, I think, on our first episode of Old School Shooters. So this goes back to like 2008. I was head coach for an MMA school in South Carolina. It was called Capo MMA, and the owner, Richie Giametta, he went back to New Jersey and he put me in charge for several months. And that in part of that wasn't just in training the fighters. I was the grappling coach. We had the boxing coach, but it was also in getting these guys to their fights. And I always said that Richie recruited from the state Penn as opposed to from Penn State. And so this was funny. We're in a strip mall, right, with this school, and there's a strip club called Lucky's that has got really hot women, but they're mostly on the darker side. It's mostly black women and South American women with just killer bodies. So we got this one guy, right, who's right out of prison, and he's got these swastika tattoos and white pride tattoos. He took a lot of pride in being the head of I think it was either White Pride or White Aryan Resistance, whichever group in his Florida prison, right? Okay. And he's a heavyweight, and he had good hands. He was a solid dude, man. I've actually got some old videos of training this guy and heavyweight. And then I had another heavyweight, Jason Lawrence, who was right out of prison too, and he was black, and he was a black gangbanger. You know, he spoke with that style and everything. So I'm thinking, these guys are gonna fucking hate each other. There's no way that these guys are gonna want to hang out like after practice. So I was talking, you know, with the white power dude, and I said, you know, Jason and I are going over there to Lucky's next door. I said, you know, and I'm old school, so I'm not offended by the white dude. I said, look, man, I said, it's going to be a little too dark for you over there, bro. You're not going to want to go. And, you know, I said, you know, but you know, it's the dark meat. You're not going to enjoy it. So this is funny. Like,
Yeah.
not only does he go, but he's doing shots with us. He's drinking beers with us. He's getting lap dances from the Nubian princess, from the black woman. And I'm like, I said, what's going on, dude? You know, what happened to your whole white? And I realize, and I believe this to be true, that it's by design that they divide the races in the prisons. With if you're a white boy, you've got to join one of those groups, right? I mean, you've got to be part of that, and to survive, you know, a lot of the time. So I come to realize this guy's not really a racist. He and the black gangbanger, they became fast friends once we all started hanging out, like off the mat. So I think it's by design. I think a lot of this nonsense is pitting us against each other.
The Italian guys were known to stay together too, of course.
Of course, yeah.
When I get transferred or pull into a place, there was always a committee of guys waiting to say hello to an Italian guy coming in. But it's funny how if we were sitting at a table together, they broke us up real quick. They didn't like the Italian guys sitting together. I guess it was just some kind of conspiracy. But other groups were allowed to do it. So that breeds that racism. And what you said is true. You know, a loner white kid coming in is going to need to latch on somewhere.
Yeah.
We didn't so much. And it's funny, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but I never looked at myself as not white until I had to fill out the sheet for a prison where are you black, white, Hispanic, Chinese, Italian, or other? I was surprised at that. I mean, Italian, I'm not considered white because I'm Italian. And I think they do that for a reason too, you know, to make you. Yeah. So
they want to keep you divided. They want, and that's fun. That's something that's kind of funny, right? The word, when people say white, this whole thing of, and you didn't used to hear that. You know, I'm old school, you know, and I think now these kids are so much more dialed into race. My girl's niece, she's from Venezuela. Glory's, you know, darker, more olive complexion like me, but her niece is Venezuelan, and this girl's as white as a sheet of paper, but she's from Venezuela, and she's telling me how she doesn't like white people. She's like, I don't like them. And I took my hand, like put it next to hers, and I said, there is no part of my body that could ever be as white as you. I said, did you ever look in a mirror at how white you are? And because they're Spanish, they think that they're not white. You know, it's bizarre, and it's all by design to keep us at odds. You know, it's not old school.
I agree. Keep the separation.
I'd like to get your take, Larry, on the issue of respect as an old school value. It's easy for those of us who are of a certain vintage to, you know, look at the younger people and say that they, you know, that seems to be a lost art. But I think in a lot of ways there's some truth to that in terms of basic manners and polite. And my credo in life and business has always been give respect, get respect.
Right.
Do you see that as an issue that's of significant importance in our society, or is it just the old guys complaining?
I learned at a young age, I don't know if these are the exact words, but respect is something you earn. It's not bestowed on anyone. Okay, you don't just get respect just because somebody says you get respect. You have to earn it. Whether it's, generally speaking, could be from being a decent person, being a leader, following rules, traditions. It doesn't always have to be from fear. That's where it becomes different. When you get into the mob world, respect is also fear. So they pretty much equals. But no, respect is something you earn. And I think it is something that's lost because same thing I go back to, the parenting, then I moved on. I wound up in Cosa Nostra lifestyle. You had to have respect. If you didn't, you were a loose cannon or a cowboy, or you disrespected people, you weren't going places and you'd probably wind up getting hurt or killed. So you probably in any walk of life, that's the one where respect meant more than anything. Okay, you couldn't disrespect your superiors, guys that were there ahead of you. Take that a step earlier. When I was a kid, I was told to respect my elders, and I did. I still do to this day. So I think it's definitely getting lost. And again, it's the teaching. It's the schools. It's the not taking the traditional things serious anymore. Just
Larry,
the same way.
You talk about the schools, and for its indoctrination here in the U.S. I mean, they are trying to turn our children against us.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
What's going on in the schools? How reading, writing, and arithmetic, those are old school.
Right.
All this other crap that they're teaching, it's garbage and has no place in the school system. But I want to bring up something like a little bit more positive when it comes to old school, and that's cars. Larry's got some beautiful, beautiful old school cars. Yeah.
I don't want you guys to think I'm disrespecting. I have to answer this. It'll take me 1 second.
Yeah.
Not more than that. Just don't leave. I don't want them to think I forgot them. It's my client.
I'll serenade the audience.
My clients in the morning, they just sent me a text. If I'll be there at 6 in the morning, I will. Okay. So go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say you've got some beautiful, beautiful cars.
Well, here's the cars I went through since I've been home from prison. I found a 97 Cougar. Okay. The interior was spotless. The whole car was spotless. You remember, right, Matt?
Oh, yeah.
That was my first one. It was like sitting in a living room in the car. And I kept it. I enjoyed sitting in it and taking it down the highway. I would pull into places. People would look at it like, look at this guy. He's living out of the 90s or the 80s. So that was one of my classics. I had a 97 Mercedes 500, the two-seater with the original convertible that goes into the trunk, which is the reason I wound up getting rid of it eventually. Once those things start breaking, forget about it. You got to be Rockefeller to replace those parts. We had the T-Bird, the retro T-Bird.
Oh, yeah.
But we had one that was a design. It was pearl white. The inside was black and pearl white. It was unbelievable. When we sold that car later on, Kelly cried. She never got over that. But then I got her an XLR, the Caddy XLR, the two-seater. Nice. They don't make them anymore. This one had the classic front on it. So I like, you know what it is? It comes down to unique. I like a little something different. Now I have a Telluride. That's my main car. That's what we use as a family. But I'm in the market for something a little unique again, whether it's a two-seater Mercedes, whether it's an older Caddy that I could run around with and have fun with. But yeah, I like those. Again, you're going old school. It's old school stuff. Big car that's comfortable, not worried about gas prices or anything like that. Although now you have to worry about them a little bit. But yeah, cars to me, I love the old stuff.
Yeah, and cocktails too. You've made some great cocktails when I've been over at your house, stayed over at your house, and
Yep.
tell the people what are some classic cocktails from the life.
Oh wow. That changes from your age. As a kid, going out on spring break, even though I was starting to get around the life, we were still drinking the kid drinks. Okay. But I'll tell you how I graduated from that. We might have kamikazes. That was a crazy vodka and lime juice, whatever. But here's what happens, and it goes back to the education and grooming and being taught the finer things. I go into a restaurant. I was about 20 years old, maybe 19, 20 years old, let's say 20. Lum Chin was a restaurant. It was the classiest Chinese place, big, beautiful lounge, brick glass all around. It was a class place. So I'm sitting there with an old girlfriend named Anne-Marie. And I think we're drinking 7 and 7 or vodka and orange juice. And it's nighttime, it's dinner time. You don't drink those drinks then, but that's what we drank as kids. So Joe Brewster comes walking in, and he was one of Greg's main guys. Okay, everybody loved him, class guy, good looking, always had a beautiful girl on his arm, made money. So he comes in and he sees me sitting there, comes over to the table, and he says, Larry, let me buy you a drink. So he sits with us, him and his girl, and he orders 4 King Louis, the whatever year it was, like King Louis the 16th or whatever it was. And this is back in like 1980, 81. So it's the first time I ever had that. And it was like a cognac, and it went down a little bit like firewater to me. It was hot. I didn't like enjoy it like I was enjoying my 7 and 7, a kid drink. But I couldn't tell him that. So anyway, so this is great, Joe. We're sipping it. And he's telling me how to drink it from the snifter. You breathe it and you sip it at the same time. So they're $85 a drink, $85 a shot for 4. So now I told him I liked it. He says, bring us another round. So we had another round. But all these years later, I developed a taste or acquired a taste for that smooth, drink it slow.
Oh yeah.
Enjoy the aroma. And there's other things. Same thing with wine. I would have some silly wine, Gallo Brothers, when we were kids. Now it's a higher end wine. I understand. I understand what a Montrachet is, how it hits your tongue and you drink it, or a nice Amarone or a good red, I'm trying to think of that other one. That's really Rothschild. Now that's real high end. I've only had it once or twice in my life, but you're talking about $400 or $500 a bottle. But you could understand, you learn that stuff.
Sure. I got to tell you, Larry.
So the drinks, Matt, they changed over the years.
Yeah.
Now I'm just
Sure.
a nice Glenlivet 18, and it's
Sure.
going down nice. I have one big ice cube in there, so it doesn't get watered down. But
Tell everybody what's in the Godfather, the drink.
Well, there's 2. The Godfather is a Scotch, and you don't need a high end. You get it,
Scotch. Yeah.
Doers or you don't need an expensive one because you're going to we put 2 or 3 parts Scotch and 1 part Amaretto.
Amaretto, yeah.
So it takes that sting out of the Scotch. If you put too much Amaretto, it gets too sweet. But just enough where you taste the slight flavor of the Amaretto, but with the Scotch, goes down smooth. 2 or 3 of those, you don't want to be leaving the house. Just stay home.
I love it. I love that drink. And I'll tell you.
Listen to this. I go out on our anniversary. This was last year, and I was introduced to a godmother. And you know what it is?
I think you told me this. Yeah.
Vodka and Amaretto.
Yeah, we had that at your house, actually. Yeah.
I think I like that better because I prefer if I'm going to have more than one. Like a Scotch, I'm having that one and that's it. But if I have like the godmother, I'd probably have 2 or 3 vodkas with a little touch of that. And you can make it in a martini glass too. Chill it. How good would that be? Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go. Oh, yeah.
yeah, because we did have the godmother at your house because I
Okay.
remembered I knew the Godfather drink already, but I had never heard of the
Oh,
godmother,
there you go.
and I
Yeah, it was
said, "Man, this
introduced
is
to me.
good." And then when I came back, I was drinking, and I'll tell you, I brought a bottle of this. I brought a bottle of this over to your house one time when I was just in Sicily 2 months ago in September, and what they drink over there is Campari and soda.
Hmm.
When Campari and soda with a splash of
Yeah,
orange juice. And when I say soda, I mean like a San Pellegrino
yeah,
or a Perrier. And then
yes.
they throw that splash of orange juice in it. And it's really hot there most of the time. And when
Mhm.
you're at the beach, oh, that's such a smooth,
And
that's
that
an old school
is
Italian
great
drink.
for settling your stomach too. My
Yeah.
uncle had those a lot. He swore by his Campari after dinner. Yep. So yeah, that's a
Yeah.
go.
'Cause
Yeah, anisette. How about having your black coffee or espresso with anisette or sambuca? That's
I love it.
nice tradition too. I'll still do that, but you know what? I find myself having American black coffee. It's a little
Hmm.
easier on my stomach, and I get a little too wiry with the black coffee with that. So I have regular American black coffee, but I'll still put some sambuca in it, and that's a great thing about 4 in the afternoon when you
Oh,
need that
yeah.
boost, a little wake up call, and yeah. So that's all stuff that is never leaving my body or my way of
Now,
life.
and you get around Christmas time and being Italian. One of the things that I miss kind of from back home, because my aunt used to make it, is oranchella, the
Mm,
oranchella liqueur. Oh,
yeah,
that's so good
yeah,
cold around Christmas.
yep,
Oh,
yep.
phenomenal. That's right.
That reminds me, Liqueur 43 is very good too. Did you ever have that?
Yeah, I love liqueur 43.
That's a
I
real
used
good.
to make a bomb with liqueur 43 when I was a regional manager in the beer business. We owned the Magic Hat Brewing Company, and we were pushing this beer number 9. It was real popular on tap, and I came up with a bomb because the Irish car bomb was so big, and I called it the Magic Carpet Ride,
Mm.
right? And I was trying to figure out the perfect shot to drop in that magic hat because it had a hint of apricot in it. It was a pale ale with a hint of apricot. And you
Mm.
dropped that liqueur 43. Oh, that was phenomenal.
Perfect. Yeah.
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 Down south, when I came to South Carolina, the big drink there on this with the snifter was the Grand Marnier.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a little sweeter,
You know?
So if you have that alone, it's like one after dinner for me. But that's a nice drink. That's a classy old school drink. People don't even know about it anymore.
No.
So yeah. And what's the one? The big tall bottle with a G. You'll know it if I think of it.
Um,
The
yeah.
where it gets skinnier at the top. Oh, jeez.
Gee.
Okay.
Gee, while you're thinking of that,
I
here's
know.
one
Yeah.
back when I lived up north, when I was still with the guy. This was back when I was with my daughter's mom, and she was a New York Italian girl, and and her father used to drink this stuff called Strega, and this was up in Westchester County, New York. I never heard of it before.
Hmm.
It's a yellow Italian liqueur. And that
Yeah.
stuff was so good. You don't find it. You find it down
Yeah.
here, maybe at the big stores.
Galliano is the one I was thinking of. Galliano.
Galliano, yeah, Galliano's good. Yeah,
But when you
yeah,
just said, reminded me of it. So
yeah. Strega
hey, Jack,
is,
we gotta give Jack a chance. He might have another question for us.
yeah,
Cool question. I feel bad, like we're not letting him.
No, no, no. I'm just
You're
taking it
leading.
all in.
You're leading the way.
I wanted to ask. We're quickly burning through our hour here, but I wanted to ask one more kind of conceptual question, and you guys have hit on that throughout the course of the discussion, and that's pop culture. And I'm wondering if you share the view that the old school pop culture that you spoke of, music, dress, wine, attitude, et cetera, et cetera. Do you feel that I don't want to say that it was it more, was it superior to today's current pop culture, or do you think the younger generations are really missing out on a renaissance period in pop culture
Well,
in the United States?
I'm gonna say they're definitely missing out, and the reason I'm gonna say that is, I grew up in the '70s. Okay, But I listened to what my mom and dad listened to in the 50s. I loved 50s music, you know, in the still of the night and all those old, great, you know, Duke of Earl, you know, Run Around Sue, 50s, and then
Yeah.
60s, Jay Black, and, the Four Seasons. But I grew up with disco. And it was rock and roll back then, disco and the rock and the long hair. But I liked disco; that was my thing. But I still appreciated the past. Okay, now they don't appreciate the past. They want to just push that all out like it never existed. Oh, disco's so good, yeah, how can you know, and listen to what they listen to now. So they don't want to ever respect the old times and the old stuff. We did, okay, and not only that, even though I was into disco, my mom and dad loved Tom Jones. I still love him. You know, Frank Sinatra, Elvis. There's kids that they don't know who Elvis is. How could
You
that
know,
be
I
possible? How could that
I
be
try to. How is that? That's crazy. I mean,
You don't
Elvis
know
is a
who Elvis
cultural
Presley
icon.
is, but
Yeah.
you know who Bruno Mars is, and like he's the greatest thing that ever happened to the world. That's not true. He's now, again, I respect that, and kids like it because the kids said it. You know, as we get older, you know, become teenagers, we start liking what we like. So we moved on from the 50s and 60s into disco. So I understand that. The kids today, they like what they like, but they still should. My son knows all the music I listen to. Songs come on, he bops around with me, he knows them all. And he's right in the age where, he could fall into the trap of all that. We don't want to know about it anymore. But I try not to let that happen.
Yeah, Dean Martin. My grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
they used to call him Dean because everybody thought he looked just like Dean Martin,
Yeah.
and he sang the Dean Martin songs, Volare, but he also used
Yeah.
to sing Baby It's Cold Outside to the
There you
Serenade the
go.
Ladies. And
Yep.
that's what I do, Jack, and
Yeah.
Larry knows. I serenade the ladies. I still do it. And I present you present yourself in an old school fashion to the ladies. And I've said this many times before. If you remind a woman she's a woman, she'll reward you for being a man. You've got
Nice.
to treat a woman like a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to serenade them, compliment them, tell them how beautiful they are. You sing to them, you open the door for them, and you treat a woman like a woman. And that's missing today. I mean, these kids now, they look it down at the ground. They don't even know how to have a conversation with a woman.
No.
And
No, and
that's why,
that's nice. Opening the door. I still open the door.
yeah. Yeah. I had a client today, a Cuban girl. She's 22. We just signed her. She's got domestic issues and child support issues. And I spent the afternoon with her, beautiful Cuban girl. And she said to me, she said, Poppy, she said, you know how to do it. Not that we had sex yet, but she said, Poppy, you know how to do it. She said, you know how to treat a woman, Poppy. And that's that's missing today. I mean,
Yeah.
these scrubs, these young scrubs now, they don't know how to talk to a woman.
I held the door open for a lady at the post office, and she was so stunned. And she's, "Oh, thank God, chivalry isn't dead." Chivalry. I mean,
Chivalry.
or for a woman, that's chivalrous. I mean, come on. So yeah,
Everywhere I go, I hold the door
but
open
you know
for
what,
women.
guys like us and our friends and people that agree with, we have to keep up the fight. We got to keep, if you want to call it a fight, keep up with tradition, keep up with old school, keep up with what made us what we are, and not fall into the trap where everybody has to agree with everything.
Oh
Okay.
God, I'll tell you, Larry. That brings something up that I really need to get to before we go, because Larry's heard my comedy, and I'm old school, man. The two rules of comedy, and I know the second part is a little offensive, but the first so is the first. If I offend you, that's your problem, not mine. It's rule number one. Rule number two, it's a joke, not a dick. Don't take it so hard. And we need to get back to that. You know,
Yeah.
we need to get back to that. I like Chappelle, some of his
Jay
monologues.
said,
Yeah, yeah.
he's,
Let's
yeah,
let's stop being panty wastes. You know, let's be men.
that's right. No, I'm not changing.
Well, gentlemen, it seems that we've burned through the hour. It flew by. I absolutely
That's a
want
good
to
thing.
thank. It is. I absolutely want to thank you, Larry, for coming on and sharing your experience and wisdom, and of course, the King. Do you have
Thank you.
any? Do you have any closing comments for everyone?
Bring me back again. I'd be more than happy to come on.
We'd love to have you.
That's my closing. Matt?
And Larry, I just want to say thank you again for everything and for introducing me to Phil there
Good.
and Fighting Edge and everybody in Florida.
And Dave
If
and
you're in the
everybody.
area, check out Larry's gym and that's it. I mean, I think
I'm going to tell you my website if they want to go check out the book. You can see it behind me, actually. It's www.larrymazza-thelife.com. Simple.
yeah, and
Larry-thelife.com.
yeah, and if you've been involved in an accident anywhere in all 50 states, not Canada, you DM me. My Facebook is full, but I can take DMs and you can follow me at Matthew J. Granahan, and we will get you the compensation that you deserve.
Well, thanks again,
Very
gentlemen.
good.
I appreciate it. We'd love to have you back, Larry, if you can find the time in the future. Encourage
Well-
all the fans on the Hannibal TV to check out the book. I know I'm going to. And King, why don't you close with the tagline?
We're silver sages spreading knowledge to the younger ages.
Very good. I
Have
like
a great
it.
night, everybody.
Good night, gentlemen. Talk
Good
to you
night,
soon.
guys.
Yeah,
Night.
Matt, we'll talk.